All right, we are live. There we go. Got the first chat going. And now I think it's somewhere up here. All right, we are excited for people to start joining us. We will get started right at 12 p.m. Eastern time, as promised, to make the most of our time together. So that gives us just a couple of seconds. If you're on here with us, you can just listen to us banter for about 30 more seconds. So we're excited. Oh, I should probably move the microphone over here.
Make your final adjustments.
That's right. We got some people joining. This is awesome. Thank you for the thumbs up. We have the chat going as well. All right, Scott. Well, it is 12 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you, everyone, as you are filtering on to join us for the first Decision Clinic. And I'm so excited I'm already seeing people popping into the chat saying they're from Texas. So hello there. Hey, Kate from Texas. And we'll I'll try to interact with the chat as best as possible. But however you may have found Scott and myself, I'm Stephanie. First, we want to say hello and thank you and how much it means that you're joining us as part of this new youth baseball community that we're really passionate about creating. So I want to first hand it over to my husband, Scott, to allow him to kind of introduce himself, his background, and how he's gotten into this crazy world of youth baseball.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. We're really excited to be here with you today. I think the impetus for this decision clinic was really a lot of parking lot conversations I have, and the fact that the game might end at 8 o'clock and I might not get home till 9. You'll say, "What were you doing?" And the honest answer is I would get stopped between the ball field, between the dugout and my car with parents asking me a lot of the same questions. And I'm passionate about coaching. We're passionate about helping families, and we thought we could do this at scale and offer it to the community that we're building as we're in transition. So that's what brought us here today. My background, I am passionate about coaching. I come from a baseball family. My mom's dad was a catcher. My dad was a catcher. I was a catcher. Both of our boys are catchers. My dad was a legendary coach, and he was so committed to his team, he didn't coach me during my entire career. He felt he couldn't fairly coach his own kids, so he lived out of district. I walked around for years saying I would never coach my own kids because that's what was modeled for me. And it took about 2 practices of Holden's first year of baseball before I felt like sitting in the stands with the knowledge that I have as a former D1 athlete, football and baseball, just wasn't fair to all of the other families, yet alone my own kids who may fall out of baseball before they ever had a chance to fall in love with baseball. So that's what brought me into coaching probably 7 years ago. I've had a lot of success since then in terms of wins and losses, but I think really the biggest measure of success is I do an exit survey at the end of the season, and 100% of our families say they would recommend our team to another family.
Yeah, no. And so it's been a journey for all of us. And the reason kind of Scott and I team up in this is to kind of give both sides the voices, right? Me being a baseball mom, he's the baseball dad and a baseball coach with his own experience in it. And what we quickly found was, and I found it even this past year, is just that youth baseball world was getting so noisy, confusing. And there were times where Scott and I weren't even on the same page with our baseball decisions and what was right for our family. And the way we kind of put it when we were thinking about it the other day was that, and maybe you can relate, every year, every season, we kind of layered on one new piece or one new thing or one new, maybe an extra coaching session, extra development session, guest playing opportunity. So each piece in and of itself wasn't too heavy, but the overall, like what kind of came from it, especially for us last year, was just something that felt really heavy. It looked like us running 2 different directions every weekend, sometimes 3 or 4 different directions, which with only 2 kids, how's that possible? But somehow it happened. And so over that year and coming into the spring, we started to make some major shifts in how our family was approaching youth baseball. We still wanted to support our kids' dreams. We have 2 sons, Bennis and Holden. Holden is 13 and Bennis is 10, 2 very different baseball players. And we'll talk more about that today. And that's kind of what brought us here, because I felt that there could be a better way to take all of these opportunities, but to actually figure out what was the best for us, but for our kids in this season. So every season is going to look different. If you've been listening to our podcast, you hear us say a lot that we take it 1 year at a time. We even take it one season at a time. We want to make that commitment, but beyond that, we allow ourselves to change. And so maybe that's a little piece that we'll get into before we dive into some really fun and what I hope you're going to find extremely informative kind of information for you here in a minute is behind us, we're from Pennsylvania. So this is not where we are right now. For those of you who have been following our journey, might realize that we have officially made the move to Florida, and specifically Bradenton. So this is our new backdrop for at least the next year. And you'll also see, of course, our lovely axe bats kind of lining here that inevitably are going to fall at some point during this live. So just get ready for it. I'm not ready for it. But the reason they're here too is definitely a shout out to our longtime partner now, which is Axe Bat. So I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you all that at the end of this live, you all have a chance to win your own, not one of these are all our boys beat up axe bats. They've used them and loved them thoroughly, but your own new axe bat of your choosing, whether you want BB Core, USA, USSSA. So stay with us till the end. And once we get to the question and answer and the comment section, I'll tell you more about what you have to do for that. So again, just kind of before I hand it back over to Scott, is my heart's desire was genuinely feeling like we could create a better way where there was more clarity, we had better communication, and we were more confident in the baseball decisions that we were making. So it would have been about last year at this time that we set out, writing articles and putting our voice now to a podcast and just sharing our heart and walking this journey in real time with each of you. So Scott, are you ready to get into what we developed as a framework for how we're making baseball decisions and what we hope that you guys learned today?
And I think for context, framework's a great word, because one of the things we've learned is that as we've gotten advice, both solicited and unsolicited over the years, is anything that's presented as an absolute, you can't do this or you have to do that. It's not grounded in the nuance of your situation. And I've had the benefit of being able to travel the country now as a coach of the USA Prime national team. And one of the things I've learned in that experience is that regionally things are a lot different. I see there's people here from Detroit, from South Carolina.
That's so cool.
Your experiences, even the rules that you play by may vary. So I do want to be careful not to present anything as an absolute, but more as a framework so that you guys can make, you can ask better questions and then make more informed decisions.
Awesome. Well, hey, we only have one slide to share, and we weren't even going to share a slide period because we're like, well, we just want to talk with you guys and have you see our faces and everything like that. But I think you'll see that this is going to be really helpful. So go ahead and share this. So this is more to help Scott and myself remember what we wanted to talk with you all about. It should be popping up here in just a second for you. All right. So the 5 pillars of better baseball decisions. Some of this might look familiar to you based on how you found us and how you found the Decision Clinic. Because if you came to us by first taking that kind of 5 free minute scorecard that we created just really as a fun tool to start with, it's not science, it's nothing specific. But what we quickly found, even with ourselves, was that it opened our eyes to the fact that when we wanted to make a decision about a team, maybe even about pulling back and having a development year for our kids, or looking at our family's finances or our family schedule, we realized it's not as simple as just one straightforward answer of, is this the right team? Because really, Scott, what defines the right team for any given kid or family?
Well, yeah, and to the point that I just made, it's going to be different for every family. So, we think about these 5 levers independently, and they may have a different weight for your family than what they have for our family. And I think, for example, the financial fit, we are fortunate that, we have resources. So it's not a question of, can we afford it? But, it was more the family fit. And does it make sense to be split every weekend as a family during these years in the boys' lives? So for us, the family fit lever became more important than the financial fit lever. But for each family listening today, it may be different. So the first one we'll start with is development. I think this is probably the most ambiguous one because development can look a lot of different ways. One of the comments you got in the circle community was about a team that doesn't practice in the fall or the winter. And one of the challenges I've always had with how travel ball works, and I have a lot of challenges with how travel ball works, but one is that you have to commit to a spring team in the summer the year before. And even as a coach, kids change so much over the course of a year, especially when you get into the puberty years. It's hard to say in July of 2025, I know who I want on my spring roster in 2026. At the same time, as a family, you're not sure if that's the team you want to be on either. But the development really happens, I think there's the off season or the winter workouts. I'm a big fan of playing multiple sports. As I mentioned, I played 2 sports all the way up through college at Penn State. So fall ball for me is kind of always an add-on, always a bonus. But the real work happens in the winter. And if it's a team that talks about they develop kids, but they don't have any type of a winter program, I would push back and really try to understand, how do they view development? And for me, for our national team where we can't get together, we do Sunday Zoom calls in the winter, and we do mental resilience training. We do baseball IQ training. We do nutrition training. So I try to train the kids in the winter on scalable skills that honestly don't just help them become better baseball players, help them become better athletes and really better people. I mean, the mental resilience is going to stay with them the rest of their lives. In terms of development in season, when you get into playing, is it a coach that is only playing kids in a primary position? Is it a coach that's batting the lineup? Is it a coach and that's going to vary whether you're on a 9 or 10-year-old team, an 11 or 12-year-old team, a local, national, or regional team. But I think realistically, any youth baseball coach should be batting the lineup the majority of the time, right? One of the things I talk to families about is that all the kids get more at bats if we play more games. So occasionally we might run into a situation where we don't bat the lineup because we're trying to win a quarterfinal against a team that we got matched up against that has a really good pitcher. And we know if we win that game, we'll likely play 2 more games. But generally, you want to be getting the kids the most reps, and you want to get kids reps in different situations. So I don't even lock into a lineup necessarily where the same kid's always batting last, right? Sometimes in pool play, if the situation presents itself, I'll roll the lineup, and whoever was on deck when the first game ended, they're going to lead off the second game. So the order stays the same, but the plate appearances are balanced because we were able to roll the lineup. The kids have a lot of fun doing that too. And you'll learn a little bit about how each kid's wired, because a kid that's always hitting in the 10 spot sees himself as a 10 hitter because that's what you've told him he is. But whenever that kid doesn't identify with the position in the lineup, you'll see that they may prosper a little bit more. And then defensively, really good teams have a lot of really good shortstops. So in pool play, are those kids all getting a chance to play shortstop and earn their reps on Sunday or in elimination games? So those are all different considerations when you're looking at the development lever and what does a program really offer. The last thing I would say is that within an organization, you have a lot of independent teams, and we haven't even gotten into the differences between rec or local versus travel versus regional. But one of the considerations is an organization that has teams at each age group where your kid may have a chance to play for the older team. Maybe they're 11U by their birth date, but they're in the class above. So they need a little bit of opportunity to play with some older kids too. Or maybe they're in the top third of the lineup and they need to be challenged a little bit more. So sometimes being within an organization, there's developmental opportunities because of the ability to play up or down.
No, that's a really important one. And so if you guys caught it, Scott and I refer to these as levers. We didn't always, I think that just evolved as we started talking about these 5. I think we were calling them pillars for a while, but then we realized they were more dynamic than that. So he just talked about development, and we'll move on to the second one here really soon. But as he's talking through each of these, I want you to be thinking about what lever feels a little bit unbalanced, or what multiple levers feel unbalanced in your family right now, because that's where we're going to want to talk with you a little bit deeper about which one are you pulling up on and which one are you pushing down on? And I'll already give you a clue. It's not possible to push down on all five and have a sane life. Been there, tried that, can tell the story. So as Scott goes now into the second one, which is role and opportunity, be thinking about which of these 5 levers is kind of your biggest pain point or your biggest struggle right now.
Yes, I just touched on role and opportunity a little bit in the context of development, but I like to think of a roster. A typical youth roster has 12 players on the roster, and I think of it in thirds. The top 4 players, everybody usually knows who they are, and you'll hear a lot of people say you don't ever want your kid to be the best player on a team because he's not being challenged, or you're not playing in challenging enough tournaments. He's not being pushed by his teammates, and he's not necessarily playing against the best competition if he is, head and shoulders better than everybody else. But the top 4, they're typically, and maybe that's your kid, you probably have your eyes open, ears open to find another team to play on. The middle 4, so hitters, 5 through 8, are pretty secure on the team. Their role, they're comfortable with. They get ample opportunities, not necessarily put in high leverage situations all the time. We have some kids on our teams that I'll bring in to pitch when the bases are loaded, and that's not the right situation to bring everybody in. But there's some kids that that can handle it. So the kids that are hitting 5 through 8 are typically really secure on the team. They're not necessarily looking for other teams. They're not necessarily going to get poached. But the team's also happy to have them. They're not necessarily looking to churn them out. And then you have the bottom third that really, I think, feels a lot of pressure to keep up, to earn their spot. They're very self-conscious or very insecure. And that's going to segue into environment. But, a word that we talk about a lot is how secure is the player in his identity, or more importantly, how secure is the parent in the player's identity or in the parent's identity, which it shouldn't come down to the parent. You should never hear a parent tell a kid, "You're embarrassing me," because youth sports isn't about the parent, it's about the kid. But sticking with role and opportunity a little bit, I think it's really important that kids develop multiple positions, especially raising catchers. There's only one catcher on the field at a time. And sometimes when you're the best, you're going to catch 4 games on a Sunday in Georgia and have to deal with it. And sometimes if you're second best, you might only catch 3 innings on that day with 4 games. So if you can't play in the outfield where there's 3 outfielders on the field all the time, you may work yourself out of a position just by virtue of limiting yourself to one position. And then opportunity, I think, is your team playing in the right tournaments? Are they playing in the right number of tournaments, right? I think I was just looking at the national rankings last night to see if they've been updated, to see where we finished the year. They have not been updated yet. But I was looking at the one team that we beat, the number 10 team in the country. They were 79-19. That's almost 100 games they played. I'm not sure what development is happening when you're playing that many games. And, Coach Cooper from Penn State talked about it. You have to have an off season because that's when you develop your second or third pitch, right? If you're a kid who's blowing fastballs by everybody at 12U, you're only going to throw fastballs right now and you're not learning how to pitch. And if you're only playing games, you're not throwing bullpens where you're learning how to pitch. So I think especially in youth sports, youth baseball in particular, it's really important that you're playing in the right tournaments in terms of competition and you're playing in the right number of tournaments so you're not overloading your schedule with games and limiting the developmental opportunity.
No, that's great. And I think the third one that you guys are about to see here, environment, might be where a lot of us are sitting right now. Because when I was watching the comments come through and even just listening to friends and fellow teammates on the field, I think a lot what comes up, environment is going to encompass the word culture, right? So you see it listed there. It's the coaching, the communication, both between the coach and the player and the coach and the family, and then the confidence you have in the team, the confidence your kid feels when he takes this field with the team. And then, of course, culture. So that's a big one. And I feel like it's where, if you're joining us and you're kind of in that early spot of that 6U to 14U, I can speak from experience. I feel like environment is where I have been hyper-focused. So Scott, talk about what we need to know.
Yeah, environment might be the one that I'm most passionate about or most intentional about. I'm really proud of the environment that we've created. And I think I'll just talk about that for a little bit. We were talking on our walk this morning that one of the things I love to do is in my winter workouts, I run open workouts. So any kid that's maybe interested in playing with us in the future, can attend one of our winter workouts and work out with us to see what we're like, to see what the development's like. We're kind of an open door, transparent organization. It's not like football where, you're worried about somebody stealing your playbook. In baseball, you're just really competing against yourself and against the game. So there's not really a lot of secrets. Obviously, you have signs, you have certain plays you're going to run, but you don't spend a lot of time in your winter workouts doing that. So having open workouts, I think, creates an environment where kids get to be around a lot of other kids, not just limited to the kids that you picked for the roster or that chose your team. Similarly, we have a lot of guest playing opportunities. So because I'm a big fan of multi-sports and I'm a big fan of playing with the kids you're going to go to high school with, travel ball a lot of times is the antithesis of those two things. So what that does is I encourage families to play multiple sports and to play on their local team in addition to a travel team. But that means that not everybody's available every weekend that we have a tournament schedule. So it opens up a lot of guest playing opportunities. Now, the guest playing opportunities are a lot easier to plug in whenever kids have worked out with us before, whenever kids do know us, and whenever we do know them. So that's part of it. I mentioned the Zoom calls that I do. So it's not just, to use a football term, it's not just the X's and O's. It is investing in the mental and emotional side as well. And I think all of that breeds an environment where the kids really learn to love each other. And I think, like you said, a lot of parents are probably here because they feel like their environment isn't right. I would suggest taking a step back and understanding what's your goal as a family. And my goal, or our goal with our boys, is for them to be the best when it matters the most. Right. So not over indexing right now on national rankings, player rankings, that kind of stuff when they're in 7th grade, 5th grade. And when you get a taste of it, we all suffer from the fear of missing out. We all suffer from FOMO. And you start to wonder, is he good enough to make this team? Is he good enough to make this list? And, the reality is that stuff changes year by year anyway. So making it now doesn't matter nearly as much as making it when he's a sophomore, junior, senior in high school, trying to look to take that next step. And then as a coach or as the director of player and coach development for our youth league, my primary goal was to help kids deepen their love of baseball. I think baseball teaches them so much, and I think baseball can build communities. And it's hard to do that when kids don't love it, right? So I could go into that a lot more, but I think having goals like being the best when it matters the most and learning to love the game, especially at youth level, contribute to creating an environment that helps kids accomplish those goals. I think the other thing we talked about is you'll hear a lot of families say, well, my kid wants to play with his friends. And I think it's important to get a little bit deeper into that idea, because I've heard that from our kids too. And Holden's best friend doesn't even play baseball, right? So he's friends with anybody he gets on the field with. And I think he's guest played a lot. We've had a lot of guest players. I mentioned we have open practices. So he's really socialized well in the baseball community. But everybody's his friend. So if he says, Dad, I want to play with my friends, it's easy to take that at face value and say, okay, well, then we need to stay with this team. Mm-hmm. But the players that I felt it was important for him to continue playing with were the ones he was going to go to high school with. So that's why we stayed in our rec league. That's why we stayed with our all-star team. That's why we stayed with our local travel when it made sense. But we didn't do it exclusively. And I think that's a mistake that I've seen families make, is that they feel like they have to do it exclusively. And if you can find a coach, a team, an environment that is understanding of what's best for the athlete, not necessarily kind of what's best for the team first, or what I see a lot of times, what's best for the coach. I think that can open up a lot of opportunity, a lot of perspective from an environment.
Yeah. And I think here, just to kind of address, as we mentioned at the beginning of this live, is that we're here in Florida. So that is not Holden's, traditional school, right? We're from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, right outside Harrisburg. And for 1 year, because we always say you make a decision 1 year at a time, it had been on our heart for a while, not a light decision we made in the heat of the moment, but probably 2 or 3 years in talking and understanding, we did decide to take a major leap and for 1 year move moved down to Florida so that Holden could train at IMG Academy. And so obviously any of you watching might be saying, well, that seems like it's a complete contradiction to what Scott just said, is like, taking him not only out of the schooling system, but out of the state entirely and putting him here at an academy. Are those going to be the people he goes to high school with? And the answer is, what's really cool is Holden has already said very clearly and definitively, and again, we'll see how he feels at the end of the year, he wants to go back to Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania next year. He wants to go back into middle school, where he will get to start playing their middle school baseball team, which feeds into, like, he can start to play in JV leading into varsity. And he's really excited to rejoin his classmates, not because he felt like he missed out on anything this year, but that this year was an investment that when done early enough, he could still drop right back into playing with his friends. So that's how it worked out for our family. Totally can see why that's like a little bit of a conundrum. But to us, it made sense, and taking it 1 year at a time worked. One other story, Scott, that you said over the years, I think we're still on the topic of environment, is you have a couple different kids now coached, players that have come to you from a very toxic environment where they were almost definitively on the verge of quitting baseball
Falling
entirely.
out of love with baseball.
So it would be a parent that came to Scott, and maybe he was a really talented player. You saw one, I think it was at a state tournament. He had played for an opposing team, and he is extremely talented. And you're like, hey, would he want to guest play with us a couple tournaments? Well, he ultimately didn't. By the time the next year rolled around, the dad said, oh yeah, he's not playing baseball at all. And we're thinking, a kid of that talent, how does that happen? And for him, the answer was an extremely toxic environment that he was allowed to sit in too long. And his dad almost thought, well, then that's just the end of the road for my son, but you saw something different. So just briefly, what do you do to rehab? Maybe that's not the right word, but to rehab a player that has fallen out of love with baseball, especially at such a young age?
Yeah, I think, talk about emotional intelligence and everything else. I think when that happens, it's typically that their confidence has eroded from that environment, and their identity was tied to their performance. And frankly, I wouldn't want to continue playing a sport that did that to me either. So I think rebuilding their confidence, but separating their identity from their performance is step number one. And that's something that you can do as parents. And there's a book that I recommend. I've recommended it. I've probably sold hundreds of copies of Dr. Tom Hanson's book called Play Big. You can go on Amazon, search for Play Big Baseball, Dr. Tom Hanson. It's probably $15, and it's written to a youth baseball player. It's a story told in a narrative form, but it gives them tools that they can use. And, I've developed a lot of my philosophy, a lot of my coaching philosophy around that book, and the idea of being unstoppably confident. And it's really cool how that translates even into business meetings and into, other life situations. But, the environment that we've created with our team is built around these three concepts to help players become unstoppably confident, and to train them with the tools and techniques they need to do that. To be contagiously positive. One of the stories that I love is whenever Trey Turner was in a slump with the Phillies and the fans started giving him a standing ovation, and how that changed his performance. The two are so closely tied together. How you feel is how you play. So if you're in an environment where people aren't being positive, being negative is being selfish, and it could be a teammate, it could be a coach, but the weight of that energy is really, really heavy. And then the third is to be appropriately competitive. We talk all the time about your worth not being on trial on the ball field. You're loved no matter what. You don't control the outcome. So if that's all true, why would you ever do anything unnatural to win a game? So that ties into, I think, creating the right environment too. The last thing I'll say is we do have a lot of guest players. It's fairly common that after one weekend playing with us, the families are asking if they can join our team. So I have not poached players. I have not recruited players, but through open practices and through guest playing opportunities and creating an environment that people want to be a part of, it is magnetic, and people do come. Just as a side note, the way that we've managed our team, the USA Prime Centurions, we've never asked anybody to leave the team. So we only bring on new players whenever spots open up if players leave, but we give right of first refusal to returning players because of our commitment to development. And development is a long-term commitment, not a not a 3-month commitment.
And that could be a whole other future decision clinic. We do plan to do these on an ongoing basis just to continue to dive more into more nuanced topics. But what Scott mentioned there, because I have seen it come up a lot in Facebook groups, which is my team took on these guest players for the weekend. They brought in these aces, and now my kid is bumped down in the lineup. That's a whole other topic we can go into, is the strategies that you've had to carefully navigate and implement to make sure that every player, especially the players that are full-time players, never feel like they've been slighted by a guest player. And sometimes what that looks like is that ace is batting bottom of the lineup, or even better yet, Holden is batting bottom of the lineup to allow more room for the other guest players. So we will even explain that to Holden and allow it to be his choice. And maybe it's just for one game, not the whole weekend.
Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, no, I really want this kid. I want this friend, is usually how he says it here. So he's willing to do that. So I think that all encompasses environment, and we certainly have spent the most time on that one, because as you can imagine, that's just really such a most important piece for kids these age. And I feel like for any parents who are walking this journey, especially if your youth baseball player that, kind of is in that age range of 6 to 14 is also your oldest player right now. This is your first time walking that journey. So
one funny anecdote I want to share, if we have time, with our USA Prime Centurions team, the PA team. We have a lot of guest players on that team, as I mentioned, and 4 of them are from Maryland. We're based in Pennsylvania, and they had a tournament rained out one weekend, but we already had our roster of 12 set for that weekend. Well, they said they wanted to come up and watch and cheer on their friends, their teammates. And I said, well, if you're coming up, bring your uniforms. I'll put you on the roster, just in case we need, just in case we get in a situation. If you're going to be there anyway, bring your jersey. You can sit in the dugout. Well, we ended up with, I think, only 11. I forget exactly how it worked out, but anyway, perfect game has a rule that you can bat 9, 10, 11, or the entire lineup, or the entire roster. So I couldn't bat. That's what it was. I couldn't bat 12. So the 12 players who were committed to being there, if I batted those 12, I couldn't play the other players. So I asked the kids on our team, after the other players had sat for the pool play games, we got into bracket play. And I asked the kids, the 12 that were rostered, if they wanted the others to play. And I said, you understand that it's not just one of them. It would have to be all of them. So we would bat 16. And the 12 players unanimously agreed to share their reps with the other 4 friends. And we batted 16. Perfect Game told me that they framed that lineup card because they've never had a team bat 16 in an elimination game, that we did win as well. So
that's a great story to encompass environment, but specifically the word culture. So again, there's so many more ways we can dive deeper into any of these topics. For our first one, we're trying to cover as much as possible for you. So let's hop over into financial fit, because assuming that it's basically all parents who are on this, I don't know, maybe you have your kid joining you or not. We've got to be honest about finances. It is really expensive. I know if anyone is also a hockey family, I have a cousin whose son plays hockey. She might argue that hockey's worse. Mm-hmm. I would still say that depending on how you're looking at it and the extent of travel that you're also adding on to your baseball experiences, it's a pretty darn expensive sport. So all things considered, anytime Scott does one of the national tournaments with, even if it's just he and Holden going, I'm quick to remind him that could have been like a weekend cruise we could have taken for that amount of money. But there's obviously some really great memories, but it's getting aligned. So Scott, what is the framework for getting aligned on family financial fit?
Yeah, I think the first thing is start by auditing what you spent last year. And you might be surprised one way or the other. And I think I can share a lot of cost savings tips, just like getting a Marriott Bonvoy credit card, so you can accrue the points, because then you can start to stay for free, and the points compound, in a certain way after you use it for a while. But that aside, I think start by auditing what you spent in the last 12 months on baseball, and it's lessons, it's equipment, it's fees, it's hotels, meals. Don't leave anything out of it, so that you have a real honest number that you can have a conversation around. And then you can say, does this feel right? Now I realized at some point in the last couple of years that, I have friends who have a golf hobby, and they'll travel down to play at Myrtle Beach, and they'll travel to play these expensive courses, and they have expensive clubs. And I realized for us, for our family, and for me in particular, youth baseball is my hobby. So if you can think about it in that framework, then you're not comparing, well, we spent this much on baseball and we spent that much on something else. You're saying, I have a hobby budget of X, and I'm going to try to operate within that. The next thing we did, I think the next thing I'll share for context is that baseball is expensive, right? If you play in 6 tournaments, that's roughly $1,000 a tournament. So that's $6,000 divided by 12 players. That's $500 per family just to play in the 6 tournaments. Now, in addition to that, you probably have to rent fields. You have to rent, a facility if you do winter workouts. So that 500 easily doubles, triples to 1,000, 1,500, even for a local team that I would say is practicing 20 hours in the winter, plays in 6 tournaments in the spring, and has uniforms. You're probably in the $1,000 to $1,500 range, period. Then a travel team oftentimes pays a small stipend to a coach, and travel teams often have to rent the fields in addition to their winter workout facility. They have to rent the fields. So a local travel team then goes into the range of probably 1,500 to 1,000 to 2,000 probably. And then if you're part of a national organization, there's a licensing fee, a franchise fee that's probably another $500. So you're probably in the $2,500 range if you're playing for a national organization's local travel team. Then you add in equipment, and you add in hotels, meals, gas if you're traveling regionally. Or if you're traveling nationally and playing in the majors, you play the Houston 1000, PGI, World Series, Beast of the East, Best of the Best. Those 5 tournaments, you're probably for a parent and a kid, probably $2,000 minimum per tournament for the travel costs, because you have to fly with the bat bags too, right? So in that example, that's $10,000. So again, if you compare that to somebody who has a golf habit, a golf hobby, it might be in the same range. And you say, okay, I'm going to put the golf clubs away for a year or two and lean into this. But if you commit to a national team and you haven't run the numbers, you're going to be blindsided by how quickly it adds up. And if you're not on the same page before you make that decision, you may end up regretting that decision.
Yeah. And so, and even to go further, and maybe it's a resource that we do put together and we drop it in Circle for you guys, which is, it's a spreadsheet that Scott put together because, he's more of a spreadsheet person. I needed the visual. And where we had a conversation like late one night was, I know we have this credit card that we opened up specifically just to put all of our baseball expenses on because that's the easiest way to track it. And also you can earn some points and stuff. But I was like, I need you to also put some projections in there because in my mind, I felt like it was way more than what I anticipated. In his mind, maybe it was a little bit under what you anticipated. But what ultimately came was just that clarity. That's a word you're going to hear us use a lot in this. And that's what I would recommend, especially for spouses and families who are just saying, I don't feel like I'm on the same page with the financial fit of the decisions we are making, is I would say, get it all out there. Because if you can put it into a spreadsheet or a Word document, whatever works for you, there's peace that comes with that because at least I know I don't like remaining in the unknown. That's really painful and scary for me. So whenever I start getting anxious, about that sort of stuff and feeling like money's flying out before I even know there it is, Scott can say, nope, here are all the expenses. Here are even the ones anticipating coming down the line. And he's usually really conservative, in the ways of saying, even if we're probably not going to spend this much, but if we do, and then he's able to say, and Stephanie, it all fits within what we agreed upon was this annual budget. So that was really important to me to do that. And that was only maybe in the recent last year or so, because especially with Scott being a coach, there was money coming in and out where he would make a payment for a tournament and he'd be reimbursed. But in the inner realm of being reimbursed, I was like, wait a second, what is that credit card charge that just came out? And then he'd be like, nope, here's what's happening. I'm getting money in and I'm going to put it, to pay off the credit card. So we share that really transparently because, money is one of those things that can strip the joy out of any experience if you don't feel like you're aligned on it. And the last piece I'll say on financial fit, and this is no fault of the family, but it can get very confusing depending on the team that you are playing for, because we have been a part of some teams that prefer to do a charge in the fall, a charge in the spring, and then there's like some reconciliations. Yeah. And you feel like you just don't know when the next charge is going to hit and there's not communication around it. So when Scott is managing a team, he wants to be very clear. And I don't know if you have just any quick advice on the way you go about it. Is it better to look at the whole year and just kind of hit the family with that total number, even if there's a little bit of sticker shock. Or I've known some other organizations that kind of like to drip it out, but I think that's more painful because it feels less expected.
Yeah, it just comes down to communication. And I think it's a fair question to ask up front before committing. What's the all-in cost? Because like you said, some of them break out their facility fees or their training fees, or they break out tournament fees. So I think it's just understanding. And when you're comparing programs, basically set up a bid sheet. I used to work in construction, and you want to be able to write it out line by line and then compare, because some are charging for some things that others aren't. And if they just say, oh, our team fees are only X, but not understand that it excluded Y and Z, can lead you to make a decision that was not fully informed. The last thing I'll say, though, is, with me wanting to help as many kids love baseball as long as possible, what I love about rec baseball is it is a community program that I took a picture in one of our last games of all of the bikes, next to the dugout. Most of the kids can ride their bike to the field. They don't even need to get a parent driving to the field because it's community based. Registration fees are usually around $100 because there's so many kids that play in the league that, it offsets the umpire costs. The fields are covered by tax dollars. So it makes it very accessible. And then when you add in all-stars, and you might have some uniforms, and you might have one or two, the state tournament, the regional tournament might require some hotels, but you can definitely play a full baseball season for under $1,000. So I was talking about the cost of travel, and it can go up, and I was given ranges there, but baseball, and there's typically scholarships available at that rec level too for families that can't afford it, because I do think everybody should have access to be able to play baseball.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into family fit as the last one. And I'm really excited then to open it up to some question and answer for you guys, because I see the comments coming in. I will get looking at those really soon. And it already sounds like what we're saying here is definitely striking a chord with you. So the last lever that you can pull is the family fit one. And what we mean for that, that's separate than finances, that's separate than environment. For me, it's really encompassing that bucket of schedule. Time. What capacity does your family have and want to have for baseball? And I think, really where I want to affirm each and every one of you right here is that that's going to look different, because I know some families that their baseball schedule would be way too much for me. But when I talk to them, I realize they don't mind it at all. They don't mind that there is baseball basically assumed every weekend year round for one of their children, because they have multiple children playing. And that usually looks like one spouse going one direction, another spouse going another direction, and maybe a set of grandparents helping with the next child. For them, that does not feel overwhelming. I quickly learned that's just not the family fit that I wanted. And, we were able to say, I wanted more margin. I wanted at least one weekend a month that we didn't have something on the calendar sports related, and we could do something family related. So that's just a quick snippet of where, and we're still refining it. Yeah. We're still figuring it out. And this year in Florida, we might realize we actually have too much margin because we've really pulled back on the extracurricular baseball and travel baseball we were formerly doing last year. So what else would you say about family fit?
Well, I would say it's probably the lever that you and I were furthest apart on. I could do baseball all day, every day. And then whatever time's left over, live life. I also would say from a kid's perspective, there is no such thing as just the right amount of baseball. It's always going to be either too much or not enough. And I would say always err on not enough, so they stay hungry. Because once a kid has had too much baseball, it's tough to recover from that sometimes. And I equate it to running a marathon and hydration. And I accidentally ran the Chicago Marathon once. It's a funny story. I was visiting friends and they had an extra bib. And on the way to the start line, I said, how do you do this? And somebody said, drink at every water station, including the first one, even when you're not thirsty, because if you wait till you're thirsty, it's too late and you won't finish the race. I think the same is true of youth baseball. It is a marathon. And just like if you let your kid eat candy, at a candy buffet, they would eat too much and get sick. If you let kids make the decisions, they're going to play too much baseball and they're going to get tired of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because we are the adults. We have to make the adult decisions for our children. Absolutely include them in the conversation. I think you can learn so much. I think just the other night, Scott, when we were driving over to IMG's campus, we had a candid conversation with Holden. How are you feeling? And he expressed, I think the words that came out of his mouth was, I hope I don't see some of the teammates that I'll be playing with this fall. So we paused and we said, why is that? And he expressed, he goes, I think I'd just be a little bit embarrassed for them to see me. Like, I don't know how he described it. They're like just in his summer clothes or with his little brother or something like that. He used the word embarrassed. And we were able to dig a little deeper into that. But we really appreciated his, authenticity, his honesty, because if he just would have hid it under some other emotion, we wouldn't have been able to assess, oh, that's what he's feeling. He's just feeling a little bit vulnerable and, not quite settled in this new role.
I think to talk about how the financial fit lever and the family fit lever, how we pulled both of those in the context of IMG, the financial fit, obviously IMG is more expensive than any travel team that we could find. But what it does is his baseball is now between 7:30 and 11:30 in the morning. And we get nights and weekends back as a family. And I am not coaching his team at IMG. So typically when we had to have a game on a Tuesday night, I'd have to be at the field 30 minutes before the team to get it ready. We'd have an hour warm up, 2-hour game, and then I'd have to clean up the field. It was a 4-hour commitment every night. That's all time we get back as a family. So we were willing to push the financial lever one direction and pull the family fit in another direction. And we're really excited about it.
Yeah. And that's a great point. So I think really the only tools there that we want to hit on is just communication. Again, that's between you and your spouse, and maybe even grandparents, if they're really helping with the schedule as well. But getting real about, like you said, everyone might come to it with a different desire for margin and a different desire for how much baseball. But in true family form, kind of have a little bit of a family meeting and say, okay, what looks like ideal schedule for you, Scott? What looks like an ideal schedule for me? Maybe neither of us get to fully have that, but we can meet somewhere in the middle where you're like, I hear you, Stephanie. It sounds like you just really want one weekend, not consumed by baseball every month. And, or maybe if it's just a day that weekend, it doesn't have to be both Saturday and Sunday. So that's been something really huge for us. And it may not always stay that way. There were years where I was just as hungry to run, the guest playing opportunities and everything else with Scott. And so I think after this year of, him not coaching at all and having so much more free time to be doing all the things together, and especially spending more time with our younger son, Bennis, which we'll talk more, once we're done with these slides here and what that looks like for our family, we might decide that next year we want to ramp it back up again because there's elements of it that we missed a little bit or come summer. So that's really the levers there. And I know we're almost at quarter of, so we're going to do Q&A here really soon. But the last thing I'll say is, if you see it off there to the right of the screen, kind of under where our camera, where you see us smiling, is there is one more. And that's the piece that I got really excited about, because these were these levers that we could pull, right? The 5 that you see on the screen in front of you. But then I sat there and I said to Scott, we have 2 sons. They both have the same parents, reasonably the same opportunities, to love baseball. And arguably even Bennis might have had more time with you, especially this last summer. But here's the truth. They couldn't be more different when it comes to how they are wired to compete. So that's like really where I'm focusing my passion right now. I haven't figured it out, but what I do know is, with my background in public relations, strategic communication, what has helped me the most is understanding how people are kind of wired to communicate, and how, for example, one message I send to a group of people or say to someone, say to a colleague, can be interpreted so differently. And then I thought, how does that also impact youth baseball and my children? So one message or what I think is encouragement for Holden could completely, discourage Bennis. And so that's the other piece that I'll say is, these 5 pillars, levers are really powerful, but then you have to look at it through the lens of your unique athlete. And if you have 2 or more children who are playing youth sports, and specifically youth baseball, I would imagine, go ahead and drop it in the comments, if your 2 children feel very different. And even if it's just nuanced, Scott has stories of truly identical twins playing baseball, and their journey the whole way up through playing, semi-pro, pro, couldn't have been more different. And how they were wired to compete, the rules that they played. So that's just the piece there. And I'm so excited. Like, as you guys are now part of this youth sports community, you're going to be getting to join us on this journey as we really try to figure out that final lever and how we can make it more accessible and more clear for families. So I'll stop sharing the screen here. I want to catch up on some of these comments. Let's see. Is the sound back up? Is anyone else? Okay.
Back on. All right, we're good.
Are we back on?
Yep.
Maybe, maybe not. That was probably something I did. Hey, first time for everything. I'm just glad the camera's still working, guys. I had nightmares about that. But anyways, we're going to get into answering some questions. So David, I'm so glad because you and I were talking in the circle chat. So Scott, I read David's question to you this morning when we were out for a walk. He has a child that burned out this summer with travel ball and now is uncertain about trying out for 8th grade baseball team coming in the coming weeks. He, the dad, doesn't want him to miss the opportunity as he was on the team last year and regrets not trying out. So let's talk a little bit about burnout, how you would either encourage or maybe listen, and like, what would you do in that scenario?
Yeah, so I guess a clarifying question. He got burnt out on travel ball, but he doesn't want to try out for the middle school team. Am I understanding that right? And is it the middle school team that he got burnt out on, or was it a different part of the travel experience that he got burnt out on?
Yeah, I'll keep my eyes on David's comment here. All right.
It says audio is gone again.
Okay. So David said that is correct. Can anyone give me a connection that our audio is up again, or let me know? So David said that's correct, okay. And it's a different travel ball team.
Yeah, so I would start with that. And, I said at the top of the call, I think there's an importance in playing with the kids he's going to go to high school with. So I would definitely encourage him to try out for the middle school team and maybe take a step back from the travel team. And, I've actually seen that a lot in our community where kids have gone on to do travel, and then they actually have a ton of fun returning to play with their school friends, even if it's select tournaments. Middle school team's obviously a different commitment, but I think as long as he's not giving up something to be on that team, if he was considering playing a different sport, I might be open to it. But I would really encourage him to leave the door open in the future, take a step back from the travel team, and just commit to the middle school team and focus on development.
Absolutely. So now everyone continue to be putting your comments in the chat and how we're going to do the Axe Back giveaway. So Scott, go ahead and start looking through some comments. Pick the next one you want to answer. Is everyone who comments, and please start by commenting kind of with the word decision. The word decision in front of your comment, and then go ahead and tell us kind of what is the biggest challenge you're facing right now? Like, what are you struggling with, or what are you considering the most? And it could be any of those pillars, or it could be something completely different. But what decision are you and your family working towards, this next coming season? And so just so you know, Scott and I have already pre-picked a certain number, and whoever comments that word decision with their comment will go through, and you will be the winner of an Axe Bat. And I'll be following up with you so that you can get connected to get your free Axe Bat of your choosing. All right.
Any other questions for us?
And I love seeing people jump in and also helping to answer, that's awesome. It's just some more recommendations for David. So That is great. And the one that I saw in the circle chat, so I'm going to read that to you as well, Scott, which is really cool. Just to know how much conversation is taking place. And just so you guys are aware, that is a place that I'll be checking in frequently, and we can continue the conversation more in there as well, even if a question doesn't come to you today or we don't get to it. So this is from Christopher, and he is the one that his son just finished his 3rd year of spring travel baseball, and now the team is going into slumber mode until next year. So he said this is the one that doesn't really practice as a team over the winter. And his son will be going into his 11U season. His 10U season came into town. So that's where he had the primary spot. And then now he's considering, should his son play up with this next team or stick with a team that doesn't feel like quite a good fit anymore?
Yeah. So when we had a chance to talk about this morning, I said that playing up as an 11-year-old on a 12-year-old team can be a little bit tricky depending on what I refer to as their biological age versus their actual maturity, right? So, some 12-year-olds that play travel ball turn 13 in May or June, and they end up being, we played against a kid who was bigger than me. We played against a bunch of kids who were bigger than me at 12U. And if you're an undersized 11U, that can be very discouraging. One of the questions I would ask is, does that same organization have an 11U team where he could guest play on the 12U team, but still have an 11U primary team? Also in different regions, at 10U, I don't know if he played with Leeds and Bucks. In the Northeast, you don't play. The bases are closed through 10U, and you play with Leeds and Bucks. And if he makes a jump, from 10U to 12U, those kids have a year's worth of experience on them playing, those different rules. So it can be challenging, and I think that challenge can be discouraging, even if you're leaving a toxic environment. But I would encourage you to try out for other 11U teams and look for guest playing opportunities. And again, if there's opportunities to train, and maybe it's not open practices like I described, but maybe an organization has lessons or clinics, you can pay and participate in those. And, a coach may pull you aside and say, hey, if he's looking for a team, we might be interested in evaluating him.
Yeah, guest playing is always a great place to start, just to kind of get a feel for what it is, but also guest practicing. See if you can just even have, kind of a guest practice with a team, because tournaments have their own vibe. It can be really different, but if you go and just see kind of what the vibe is with the other players and how it works with your youth athlete, we found a lot of benefit in guest practicing, which is pretty easy. You said you are always happy to have someone guest practice with your team, because for you, it's a little bit like, just development. It's development in the sense of team development, where you're kind of scouting out what might be a next future player. Yeah, so I love this. It says decision. I'm just balancing everything. My son is in travel ball. My daughter is competitive dance. Oh my gosh, I think that's a lot. So it seems like the whole week is taken over one of another. You are speaking my language, and I only have 2 sons, and they both play the same sport. But having a husband who was trying to coach both of them across multiple teams, it really, I don't think we had a family meal, really any of spring. So now that we have kind of right-sized that with our move here, I joked to Scott, I didn't realize how much I would have to start cooking again to have all these family meals. So it's interesting. And I think you want to support your kids, and you want to give each of them an opportunity to play an in-season sport. But when you have 2 kids, 3 kids, my sister has 4 kids, and each of them are playing their own in-season sport, that is more than, man-on-man defense there. That is like not even zone defense. It requires a whole village. And then no matter what, every day you still feel like someone's getting cheated by, we as parents can't be at every competition and every game. So we have to choose what we're doing there. So I don't know, Scott, I think there's seasons to everything. And I know for us, a lot of times we just say that you have to hunker down in certain seasons and just say, we're going to get through it. So for spring, what that looked like for us, in spring, even going into June, because we were making this move all at the same time, I was just sometimes at my wit's end. And I was like, Scott, I don't know how we're going to do this. We have to pull back. And he said, we made a commitment, and the light's at the end of the tunnel, and we're going to get through it, but we have to honor these commitments, and then we're going to make a change. So sometimes when you're in a season and you realize you've overcommitted, if you really want to honor those commitments, you just have to get through it. But how we've handled that is to say, we're not going to make the same decision again. We're going to right size it come fall, come winter, whatever that might be.
There are some questions here about guest playing and guest practicing. And, I think at a high level, I would suggest just building your baseball network. So when you play against a team, if it's a team that you like how they carried themselves on the field, there's a lot of stories, a lot of anecdotes I could share. One perfect game tournament we played, and we won the championship in extra innings. And afterwards, their coach complimented one of our players for tipping his cap to their player for making a great play. And I said to myself, that's a team, that's a coach that, I would be happy to share players with, refer players to. And his kid, went on to play in tournaments with us, and Holden has gone on to play in tournaments with them. So pay attention to the teams you play against. I mean, that's really the first and best opportunity to evaluate other teams, and let the coach know afterwards that you're open to guest playing opportunities. You can start with your coach. If it's the right culture, right environment, your coach will say, yeah, I'll keep my ears open, because I have people reach out to me all the time and say, hey, I need a player this weekend. Do you know anybody? Well, I have 3 players on my team that I know are always looking for extra baseball because we're their only team. So that's how we do it on the playing side. On the practice side, I would say contact local facilities, find out, if they have teams that are run out of that facility. Contact those teams and see if they would be open to letting you come evaluate a practice, even take a private lesson with one of the coaches. Some of the national organizations like a Ghost out of New Jersey, I know that you can go take lessons at their facility. They have actually paid $20 to go take batting practice with the team on a Friday night. So it requires a little bit of research, but I think going through the facilities is probably the best way to find opportunities to experience practices with other teams.
There are so many good questions here, and we're going to get through as many as you guys want to stay on and continue to join us. But because we are right at 1 o'clock, our special number, and if you guys know us, it's no surprise, our special family number is 8. So the 8th comment that I'm counting here that used the word decision in it is David Bartlett 1002. So congratulations, David. I'll be following up with you. I do know I have your email and I can find you in Circle, but you are the winner of the free Axe Bat. And again, you'll get to choose what we have here. You don't have to choose just between these. You can go to axebat.com. We highly suggest you do. But we have the USA Ripple, which my son Bennis absolutely loved this rec season. And this, of course, is the USSSA Warp that both boys have loved. And if you guys have been paying attention to AxeBat, they just launched a brand new design of this Warp called the Warp Wild, which has cheetah print all over it. Super, super swaggy, super fun. But the coolest thing you guys see there, of course, is what Axe is known for, which is the Axe handle technology. So, David, I'll follow up with you, and we might even have something a little bit fun in store for everyone. Now that I have you guys in Circle and your email addresses, if I can work out another fun deal with AxeBat. So let's get back to questions. And again, if anyone has to hop up, totally understand. But if you want to stay, we will stay as long as you have questions. And we can also later on, of course, answer any questions by email or in Circle. So Scott, the one that really got me is, and I think it was Christopher that shared it again, is saying that he asked his son again this morning. He admitted he would learn more, but started crying, thinking about leaving his team. And it's a rough decision after watching him break down. And I think we've been in those moments, whether it's been actual tears or just seeing our kid really struggling with a decision. What do you do when you can clearly see that you're giving your child a decision, they're struggling with it? How do you support them?
Yeah. Well, I think to speak specifically to Chris, because you shared the full question earlier this morning, with the team not doing anything in the fall, I would find a different team for him to play with in the fall. You're not taking him off of his team. You're letting him continue with his team in the spring and his friends on that team. But I would get him out of his comfort zone and playing with another team to realize that the world isn't as scary as maybe he feels like it is. And then in the spring, whatever team you play with in the fall, there may be guest playing opportunities with them then in the spring because they are familiar with him. You're familiar with them. So I would look for a fall team, and most teams need help in the fall because they have a couple kids that play football or soccer or whatever else. So, teams struggle to put together a full roster, but they don't necessarily want to commit to somebody in the fall that's expecting a spot in the spring. So the fall is a great time to explore other teams and get your kid a little bit uncomfortable playing with new people, and he'll realize that he has friends, as long as they put the uniform on
Yeah. Here is a great question from Roy G. He said, as a coach, half the kids have to move up to 10U, which includes my kid and all my assistant coaches' kids. I am having a hard time drafting the convo with the younger kids' fams. And you, as a coach, have experienced this. So Holden's regional team, you're no longer coaching. And so, he's having to take half the kids and go to a new team. The younger kids and their families, I'm assuming, Roy, you're having to tell them, hey, we're now, you're gonna have to find a new team, or you're gonna have to find a new coach. So that's a really hard conversation.
Yeah, I don't fully understand the dynamics here, but I would say hold a tryout and invite all of the kids, whether they're 10 or 9, to participate in that tryout. And then you're picking a new team, essentially. If the age, restrictions are forcing you to move half the team up, I always try to not make decisions for other families. So if you say, hey, obviously we have to move up, the other coaches are moving up, we're going to be coaching this 10U team. We're having tryouts or open tryouts, and we would encourage you to come. You may find that of the 5 families you're worried about leaving behind, 4 of them don't even choose to attend the tryout because they don't want to play on an older team or something like that. So you can relieve yourself of that by not making that not feel like you're making that decision for them, and giving them an opportunity. And you also may find that there's other 10-year-olds that want to try out, and there might be 1 or 2 of those 9-year-olds that you'd rather have anyway.
No, that's great advice there. And so I think that covers most of it here. Like I said, you are going to have the opportunity to continue to interface with Scott and myself, whether that's, you've been getting our emails, that is our email address. When you hit respond to that, if you have another question that you want to take off this chat, something that's more private, more personal, just, we will try to get back to everyone we can within 1 day, 2 days.
So I did see a question here about a 14U playing up on 15U. That's an age where I think it makes sense. I think, 8 playing up on 9, 9 up on 10, 14 up on 15. I think those are ages that make sense, especially because at that point, he's probably going to be a freshman in high school. And if he makes the varsity team, he's going to be playing against 18-year-olds. So I think a 14U playing up, he has had a chance to develop physically a little bit. Now, the question was more reps or better competition. I think it comes down to goals. And if you think he has a chance to play in varsity in the spring, I would probably play the better competition. If you think it's likely that he makes the JV team in the spring, then I would probably get the more reps.
Yeah, that's great advice. And also taking into account, I think at that point, most have, gone through puberty. And I know that's like a really big conversation a lot of people talk about. And it's also something Scott and I were talking about this morning on our walk. And, it's a big consideration for especially Holden right now, who has not hit that growth spurt. And so if he were to play up, I think he'd probably be at a disadvantage where sometimes size can work to an advantage. So you really have to watch that at about, 12, 13, 14.
And here's a question about that specifically. And she shares that her son is undersized, and she's worried about him getting, I don't want to misquote it, overlooked or chosen to play less. And, there's a kid on our team that I have a big heart for. He's been the smallest kid the entire time. And my encouragement to him is always to play his game, right? The bigger kids are going to try to hit the ball far. They're going to throw the ball hard. But this kid is a little left-handed pitcher, and he's had a spot on our team. And we've had very, very competitive teams. And most other people would look at him and say, how does he get to play on that team? But he gets to play on that team because he plays his role very, very well. You know exactly who I'm talking about. And we played in a championship, the Perfect Game Northeast World Series championship game. And I brought him into a situation to pitch against the number 2 team in the country, number 6 team in the country. And he throws this soft little curveball, and he can hit his spots. And he had them spinning in circles. And, he didn't make our team because he throws the hardest. He actually made our team because he understands that he's not supposed to try to keep up with the kids who throw the hardest. He's going to do what he does best and do it, when we need it. And we ended up winning that game. How many home runs did we have that weekend? Like 18 home runs. He won that game with a sacrifice bunt because that's the role he played. And I've asked other kids, kids who are phenomenal players to bunt in appropriate situations. And they've told me that they're nervous or scared to do it because they've never done it before. But this kid who's undersized embraced that role and got really good at the things that other kids aren't doing right now. And that's what's going to help him play a lot longer than these other kids too. As a pitcher, he's learning how to pitch because he can't just blow the ball by people. As a hitter, he's learning how to bunt. He's learning how to place the ball. He's learning how to hit behind runners, all that stuff, because he can't hit the ball over the fence. And it's made him a really, really good ball player. And he is by far the smallest kid on that team.
Yeah. And I think, you truly do look at all of your players like sons to a degree. And I think it reminds me, like, in a family environment, where, you can look at one child and say, I don't want you to be exactly like your sibling, because I need you. I don't need an identical carbon copy of your brother, your sister. I need you to be the unique person that God created you to be. And I think the same is true of these baseball players. So for that undersized player Scott was just talking about, is, you have enough of those heavy hitters, and they play a very unique role as well. But what you need is uniquely that smaller, crafty lefty pitcher who can bunt, because in that scenario, that's what won the game. So hopefully that gives any parent a little bit of encouragement. If you are sitting here with a child that you would say is undersized or a little small for his age, yes, his path is going to be a little different as far as training goes and development goes, but so many inspiring stories, even up to the major leagues, that will tell you that those often develop the players with the biggest heart. So
here's a question about the best team for a 6-year-old, loves both squads. I would just caution you to lean into the environment that he's going to have the most fun, because at 6, it's all about learning to love the game. And I wouldn't look much beyond that as far as development. Love the game. It is a marathon. It's a long game. At 6, you want to find the environment where he's going to have the most fun.
Yeah, but it's like right size for him. Exactly. Well, truly, guys, this is such a pleasure. We had so much fun. Thank you for your thank yous in the comment. That always means a lot. So we'll wrap it up here, but we're excited to already start brainstorming when we might want to do the next decision clinic. We'll probably still call it the same thing, but it's not going to be the same presentation. I don't think we could do it again if we tried, but it will definitely dive into some of these topics, even based upon the questions that you have given us. That gives us more than enough information for future podcasts and live events like this. It's just our heart to continue to grow this youth baseball community. And we're grateful that you guys shared some time with us.
And thanks to Axe Bat and Just Bats for spreading the word, and Axe for donating the bat. Hopefully, is it who won, Christopher?
David Bartlett.
David won the bat. So David, hopefully you get one that your boy or your boys enjoy. They're great bats. We've loved them. They've been really good to our family. So yeah, thanks for joining us. I love talking about this stuff. And like I said, these are parking lot conversations I was having pretty much every night. So happy to share some of these insights with you, and continue to provide feedback as we build the community. Yeah. We value your opinions and want to make sure that we're creating value.
And if there's anything else we didn't get to, just come meet us inside Circle or hit reply to those emails. So thank you, guys.